I work at Dairy Queen as a shift leader, and having this position puts me in charge of other workers and puts me above other workers in both pay and responsibility. When the minimum wage increased on July 1st to $9.25, I found myself a little more than frustrated at the fact that all the people who don't step up here were making close to what I was making, a mere 25 cents less when they were previously making 75 cents less. That is why today we're going to talk about minimum wage in Maryland and how it changes and the effects that it has on the economy. Working at Dairy Queen has given me, front insight on how minimum wage affects both the economy and the people that are a part of it. This topic, it affects the price of everything that revolves around in the economy, because when the minimum wage is increased, the cost of living is increased, which means that all of the prices will raise, and this puts strain on the economy in both the fact that people who protest for minimum wage will constantly continue to protest for its increase, while prices will continue to raise, and then all of the other middle class and upper class jobs will get frustrated because they're having to pay more without getting raises. And it's just a constant cycle that will continue on and on and on until somebody eventually stops it. Now, our first point is we're going to talk about how the wages are increasing in just Maryland. So, legislation that goes through the State Department is one of the biggest ways that the wage increases. Lawmakers, they push for bills to be made. Well, our most recent one is the Maryland Minimum Wage and Overtime Law, which increased the minimum wage yearly. It began last year. The minimum wage increase, it went from 8.25 to 8.75, and then this year it went from 8.75 to 9.25, and next year it's going to go from 9.25 to 10.10. In addition, it also prevented companies from not paying overtime to salary workers. So, like my managers, they wouldn't get paid for their overtime. And so sometimes they'd work 60 hours a week and they wouldn't get paid for it. And now they're required to only work 45 because the companies, they don't have enough money to pay them the overtime that they work. Now, that legislation that's driven through the State Department is driven by protests and activists and lobbyists, but mostly protests that happen by the common people, the minimum wage workers. They want the wages to raise, so they go on strike. They interrupt traffic, they organize big events. I know there's been protests in Baltimore. There was one at the University of Maryland last year, and they're pushing to raise the wages to $9.25 or to $15 an hour. Now, this brings us to the minimum wage increasing. Now, next year, as I said before, the minimum wage is going to increase to $10.10, which is a very dramatic increase from this year itself. We started 50 cents, we started gaining by 50 cents, and then we went to 75 cents, and now we're at 85 cents now, so almost $1 in gain in minimum wage. That's going to have some pretty big effects. And Maryland in the United States has the 14th highest minimum wage, which I was shocked about. I thought it would have been higher because when I think about the minimum wage being $9.25 right now, I think that's quite a bit for the work that is done in fast food restaurants. And interestingly enough, DC actually has the highest minimum wage at $12.50 an hour, which is kind of crazy. Now, to our last point is the effects that minimum wage increasing, or minimum wage itself, has on the economy. Now, when the minimum wage increases, the price of everything, as I mentioned before, increases. So that happens because the employers need to balance out, they're putting out more money to their employees, so they're getting less revenue. And that's a big problem, because if they get less revenue, then they're going to have a harder time staying in business. Now, what this eventually leads to is either cutting hours or laying off workers, which comes to our second point. As minimum wage increases, our unemployment rates are going to increase, because employers are not going to be able to have enough money to hire more people if they're putting more money out. They're going to prioritize the workers they know are good and they're reliable and they know what they're doing over, workers that they just want to pick up off the street and hope that they're good. Now, in conclusion, the minimum wage is something that's been, pricey. It has its good qualities, so if I was working here at Dairy Queen, where I'm at right now, actually, if I was working here and they paid me 95 cents an hour, that would kind of stink. So the minimum wage is actually good, but at the rates that it's climbing, it's just going to have a devastating effect on our economy. It's going to make middle class jobs seem a lot less desirable if it keeps raising at the rates that it is now. It's eventually going to drive the unemployment cost up so high, people my age aren't going to be able to work to pay for college. People younger than me aren't going to be able to, start working somewhere. If poorer families, they need their children to help with the bills and they need to go out there and work, those children aren't going to be able to get hired. They're too young. The companies aren't going to want to take the risk. So minimum wage, while it's important, it's also a little out of control, and that's why it's important to be informed on it and to understand such an important topic in both the state and the entire country.